Welcome to the Dragon's Library, your source for games, movies, shows, and more. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So today we are talking about the Book of Night. So this is basically an urban fantasy story, nothing really that special here, but all in all, yeah, it was a fun time, nice, interesting core magic system, good characters that have to make morally complex decisions in situations that don't have a single right answer, general things like that I really enjoyed. And I actually ended up really liking the main protagonist, Charlie Hall. She's a lot of fun. Enough first impressions, let's get into this book. So, summary. Basically, Charlie Hall is a magic thief. In this world, there are Gloamists, people who can manipulate their shadows and can steal and manipulate the shadows of others. They were mostly a rare occurrence that just kind of naturally, spontaneously occurred in various people, not bloodline specific or anything. It's separate. We get into how they're created later in the book, but they were only publicly revealed after a massacre in which a shadow detached itself from a Gloamist after it died and killed a bunch of people, revealing them to the world. Since then, all the individual Gloamists suddenly realized, I'm not alone. The small communities began interconnecting with each other, and now there's an underground market for books on Gloamist techniques. And Charlie Hall is a thief. She's basically your, femme fatale, I steal, I have a charming voice, I pour you a drink while I pick your pockets kind of person. And she's made basically all the bad life decisions, and her mother made all the bad life decisions for her, so she feels like she never even had a chance. She's good at what she does, but she's trying to retire so she can earn enough money for her sister to go to college and get a proper education that she never had the opportunity for. She also lives with her boyfriend, Vince, who is missing a shadow, so there's intrigue there, but she doesn't tell him about how she used to be, a very famous in the underground Gloamist community, thief called the Charleton, and he doesn't talk about his mysterious past because he so obviously has some horrible thing happen to him, that Charlie's like, look, we have a good thing going. I don't need to know about his past. He doesn't need to know mine. This is our relationship. But then a famous book called the Libre Noctem, which is the Book of the Night, is stolen and or goes missing. Charlie gets drawn into this intrigue, which Vince might have something. Everyone's got an agenda. We got to figure out who we can trust. Thief plot. And I really like it. Charlie comes across as extremely resourceful. There's a very clear indication as to why she became a thief, how she became a thief, how she was drawn to this life. The story starts out with a small boy feeding his shadow, and it then goes into Charlie in the present day, and then we get flat. And then she talks about her early life and how she got drawn into scamming and thieving and con artistry, essentially. And it all eventually ties together at the end. All three of these separate plot lines. The boy with his shadow, Charlie Hall, and Charlie Hall's past. And they interconnect in ways you wouldn't originally suspect, which is very nice. What makes this book interesting? So, there are two things here. There's the characters and the magic system. I'm going to start with the magic system first, because that's what really drew me to this. Now, don't get me wrong, a thief in an urban fantasy world stealing magical grimoires for mages is just a cool concept in and of itself. That's awesome. I love it. I also really like what they did with her eventual arc. I kind of saw it coming, but not until the end of the climax when I realized, I think this is how she's going to solve it, and is that going to work out for her? I did figure out one major twist, but I feel like that twist was something it's designed for most people to figure out, so you're not going to figure out the big twist when Charlie puts together the overall scheme. It's sort of meant to distract you from Charlie figuring out the big conspiracy and putting everything together. But looking back, everything that happened in the finale was something I could have figured out. And Charlie actually runs through it during the finale in her own head. And when she says things, you're like, so that was what the random comment about how some shops are selling that shoddy off-brand fake onyx meant. Fun fact, with the magic system, onyx can, turn shadows physical. Onyx knives can cut off shadows, even if you're not a Gloamist, and they can be used to kill shadows as well. So, but this is very much a plot you could probably read. I'm probably gonna listen to this book again. I listened to it on Audible for those of you who don't know. And I'm going to listen to this again and just pick out how many deals, like, oh, so that was what that was meaning. Oh my god, I didn't even catch that. Like, this feels like a book that's actually layered with its mysteries. And I really like that. I love when you can pick through a mystery book a second time and be like, oh, ooh, so they were trying to tip me off here and here and here. These are all the clues I missed if I was just paying a bit more attention. And it's really hard to tell what offhanded comments might be important in a mystery story. Especially in a story like this with magic and thieves and backstabbers and liars. It's really hard to pick out those details. But the main point, the main mysteries, especially, and one of the things this book does to twist you so you're not as concerned about the main overarching conspiracy mystery, is get you invested in smaller personal mysteries, which can help, which are a lot easier to solve. Because you're much more invested in paying attention to those smaller details that are going to be related to that. And I feel like that's a good thing, because that way you still get the benefit of solving mysteries and feeling like you were intelligent and worked out what the book was doing ahead of time, but the book can still surprise you on other things. Because it's not just the personal mysteries and identity plots and motivations behind it, but also the motivations of the enemies or the overarching conspiracy, how these people are going to react, how the protagonist is getting out of the situation. And it really weaves all these threads together in such that you can pick out a few without uncovering everything. And I know I'm basically just saying it's a well-written mystery book, but yeah, it's a well-written mystery book. And the shadow magic is a perfect fit for this. OMG. And they're so creepy too. The small little things they can do, like when Charlie is nearly like strangled to death by a shadow climbing down her throat and blocking her airways, and it's just like, holy shit, that is yikes. And then there are little things like how you can turn, like how shadows can affect the emotions of the people who have them. So there's this whole new craze, which is basically drugs, where they take your shadow and make it relive all of your greatest emotions. You're literally high on happiness. It's literally overloading your brain with dopamine using a shadow. It's really weird. And it's not technically like a drug or anything, so it's super prevalent now. Like, there are people constantly talking about getting blissed out of their minds. It's like, how is this legal? It's like, oh, it's not a drug. The world has no idea how to deal with magically induced memory bliss. That is going to be really hard to regulate. The whole story takes place up in Massachusetts, which becomes sort of a center for the Gloamist community. I just love that. Gloamists. It's just such a fun name for their mages. Love it. Fantastic. This book just does so many interesting and weird things. The way it uses onyx is very nice. I love the way that shadow magic actually has a history behind it in the world. Like, there are loads of relics of shadow magic. It's like, yeah, a lot of this stuff was really weird for years, and we never quite figured out what it all did. But there were definitely people, like, they even talk about how there were early Gloamist message boards, like private people reaching out online. But because, Gloamists were so rare, and they still are rare, although they're a lot more common now that people know about them and are constantly trying to become one. Although nobody really knows how. Like, Charlie's little sister really wants to be a Gloamist, and so she's constantly, like, going out with her friends and trying to do weird stuff. There's this whole thing about how Charlie found her in an ice tub, in a tub full with ice, and she was like freezing, like near hypothermia, and she was just like, I gotta stay there a little longer. She heard online that might be a way to get your shadow up. And weirdly enough, she might not be entirely wrong. I'll get to that in the spoiler when I talk about how Gloamists gain their abilities. But it's essentially a free Wild West. They were only revealed like a few years ago. Like, Charlie grew up in a world where magic was not entirely real, and then, like, midway through her teens, it was suddenly real. Whereas, Posse, by the time she became, like, a tween, magic was suddenly revealed to the world. So she grew up in a world where magic was real, essentially. And she was a muggle. Which isn't a great feeling. Then there's the stuff with Vince, and he does become a very important player. The shadow missing, all of it. Although I called that about halfway through the book, and that's the one thing I caught. I caught this really early on, but this is the obvious twist. Like, beside the first thing, it's really obvious. And I shouldn't feel as proud as I do, but I feel like they really did try and misdirect you on this, so I feel good about it. They left more than enough clues, though. Anyway. So yeah. All in all, this is a fantastic magic system with tons of subtlety. It's a very subtle power, too. Like, yeah, Gloamists can grab you and stuff like that, but it's a shadow. It's really hard to see. And the small alterations they can do, like they mentioned, like, you can alter somebody's shadow to have, like, wings. But unless you're a Gloamist yourself, the most you're going to get is a few extra inches on your jump. Like, nothing that an athlete couldn't do, essentially. A proper Gloamist with a lot of power might be able to create wings and fly, but we only saw one, I think, in like the climax of the film, so it's implied to be a very rare skill to be able to actually fly or even glide with your shadow. So it's definitely a skill that not a lot of people have, even amongst the Gloamists. There are also different arts and disciplines, and most Gloamists are essentially learning from scratch. That's why the grimoires are so valuable, because they're not really spells as much as they are techniques on how to manipulate your shadow to get results that other Gloamists learned over their individual lifespans, from beginning to end. And since every Gloamist kind of starts at zero, they all develop their own unique methods of manipulating the shadow. So it's sort of divided into sects based on how they ended up personally manipulating, which I think is a lot more interesting than just segmenting magic off into this is the way you can form magic. It's like, no, these sects kind of overlap in weird ways in some places, and they were mostly formed over the different ways individual users started using their shadows when they were starting from scratch. All in all, very interesting. I also like how Charlie is she comes off as a very competent protagonist, although someone who's very overwhelmed by the world and is really just trying to scrape by. Unlike a lot of other thieves who want to put it behind them, Charlie's actually feels like a struggle. Like, she feels like the person who still wants to steal, but is just done. She's done. She has to put this behind herself for her sister, for her boyfriend, for everyone else. She has to put it behind her, but she can't resist. You get more of it in your backstory, but essentially, if I had to boil it down, this is the only thing she's ever been good at, and even when given other opportunities, she's just not able to make ends meet without doing it. And so not only does she enjoy doing it, she feels like she has to. And it's this sort of self-destructive cycle that she watched her mom go through, and now she feels like she's going through. And she genuinely feels like helpless in her own mind. Even though she's a really badass, she feels emotionally vulnerable, which is nice. I like that. The author was able to describe this unique balance. And yeah, she makes stupid decisions, but she tells you up front, her entire life has been one bad decision after another. And even when she makes those decisions, they still feel in character. Like, these feel like something a person would do. Like, an old shadow thief would do. Now, she didn't ever steal shadows, I don't believe. That's considered, pretty freaking bad. But she stole grimoires, which is, you basically walked into a wizard's house and stole their most valuable spellbook. Okay. Not something they're gonna be taking nicely, but, we also got Posse. I mentioned her. She's Charlie's sister. She does tarot card readings over the internet. Although she actually seems to believe in it. She grew up in a world where magic is real, so she's a lot more open-minded when it comes to supernatural stuff, even though the shadow magic has started being explained by, actual magic. They apparently tie it to dark matter and dark energy, which makes sense if you're going to do dark or shadow manipulation, you usually tie it to one of those. They teach the actual physics of it, very basic in the background. It's there are researchers studying it. It's linked to these phenomena that you might have heard of in the real world. And that's all we're going to talk about here, aside from occasional energy exchange and the blood stuff. That's all we're going to talk about. Don't worry, let's get back to the shadow mages doing creepy things with their creepy shadows. You also have the blights, which are shadows that came off people. There's a lot more to say about them, though. I will not talk about that. You also have the terrifying Hierophant. There's this cabal of powerful magic users, a billionaire. His last name is Salt. That's terrorizing the kids in the book. It's involved in some nasty shit. Charlie had a run-in with him when he was younger. It was not a good run-in. And the Cabal hires the Hierophant. He's manipulating it. It's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of characters and interactions. Not going to go all in the basic review. And the spoiler is actually going to be pretty small because this is a mystery series. And I think you should experience it yourself. But, going over from there, the writing. This is a pretty medium-sized book. It's about a 20-hour audiobook. What was it, 30 chapters, I think? I liked the ending. I'm not going to say much on it, but it is the kind of bittersweet ending I enjoy, where the characters, they succeed. I guess, technically. Charlie, she's in a place after this. Honestly, I would really like to see a sequel to the Book of Night, quite frankly. I feel like this leaves a path open for sequel. And I think I would like a sequel of this. I don't always want a sequel, okay? I want to be clear. I think Obsidian is good. It's fine. It doesn't need a sequel. Servant Mage doesn't need a sequel. But I think the Book of Night is screaming for a sequel. Based on the ending, which I cannot talk about. Because, you need to see this for yourself because it has major spoilers to even try and talk about it. It's like, no. Sorry, no, there's no way I can talk about that ending. As much as I like it for being kind of bittersweet, without heavy spoilers. So, yeah. Anyway, let's see, what else? All in all, the writing's pretty solid. Not something I talk about a lot. There's nothing standout-ish. I do feel like Holly Black does have a good grasp on the kind of micro-analysm that a thief has. Charlie's constantly analyzing people as marks, checking them out for traps or, how she could grab something out of their pockets without them noticing. She breaks down her process for us mentally, going through the checklist of steps, never trying to forget anything. She talks about how she didn't really get a chance to completely taste a place, but she's got to break in there anyway, so this is how she's going to do it. And I really like this. It shows that she's actually put a lot of thought into how this kind of character would think through her, her heists and her plans. And we get a good grasp of her process, which is sort of like a mix of, skills that she's practiced for years and this, cultivated improv skill that she's developed on the side because she knows that no plan survives first contact. Which is, good. That's the kind of mix you want to see in a thief character. Now, she's one of the only characters we get, an in-depth look into. There is one other, which involves the boy and his shadow thing from the prologue, because we do see things from their perspective. We do see more than just that prologue, but I'm not going to talk about that because that's tied to the ending and the other reveal I don't want to talk about, so this is the problem with reviewing mystery stories, because I want to talk about why this reveal is good, but I can't talk about it without going to spoilers. So I'm going to save that for a spoiler section. I highly recommend you read it before I talk about the spoiler section, because it's really interesting watching it unfold from your perspective as someone who has zero knowledge in how this world works and how these characters work and who these characters are. And I feel like it would take something away from this book if you read it already knowing all the plot twists. Because this is a mystery story, I feel. I don't think that's a hard thing to say. It is a mystery. Charlie has no idea what's going on at first. Other than she's caught up in something she never wanted to get caught up in ever again, and this is like 1,000 times worse than anything else she's been in. Ugh. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a good 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10? Should I give it See, I want to say 8. But a part of me is like 9. This book stands out. I'm going to give this a 9, actually. The reason I'm giving this a 9 is, yes, this is an 8 in quality. It's definitely good quality. But it sticks out for me. Because this is a very well thought out magic system with well thought out characters. It deserves a 9. So let's give it a 9. Yeah, this is a 9 out of 10 book this year. Gloamists series, book 3. Do not let me down. Do not let the Book of Night beat you, Naomi Novik. Come on. You're better than this. It's coming out in September. Super excited. So yeah. Holly Black, your Book of Night, your Libre Noctem gets a 9 out of 10. Check it out. Grab it at your local bookstore or on Amazon. I will have links to both in the description below. So if you don't know where to get it, now you do. That's something I do with all my books, all my movies that I can, and, shows, everything like that. You can almost always, unless I see it in theaters, find a link to it in the description. Just a little helpful thing from me to you. So, moving on to the spoiler section. Since this is a mystery story, I must warn you, there will be massive spoilers for the plot that may affect your enjoyment of the piece as a whole. This is not the kind of spoilers that you can just walk into like in an action movie. This is a mystery plot, so knowing who did what and why will heavily affect your enjoyment of the mystery plot. Do not listen to this part of the review unless you have read or listened to the book or you do not wish to do so in the future. If you change your mind about that after the fact, I am not responsible for lack of enjoyment. Okay, let's get started. Now that everyone who's gone is gone, hint hint, one last time, I'm serious. Okay, so... Vince is a blight, which is a shadow that has detached from its owner. There's a lot more to that, but short story, he was the rich son of that billionaire Mr. Salt, who had a daughter. He was the grandson, not son, Mr. Salt, and Mr. Salt's daughter from a second marriage. So he was the grandson from the first marriage. She was the daughter from the second marriage, so they're about the same age. He basically infused his daughter with a Gloamist shadow in order to turn her into a pseudo-Gloamist, and he found out that his son Remy was an actual Gloamist, years after his daughter had been put into rehab and his grandfather had taken Remy in. This was during the early days when magic was first starting to seep back into the modern world. Remy had been different than other Gloamists. See, Gloamists are almost as afraid of their shadows taking over them as they are of other blights. So they tend to dehumanize the shadow. They push the negative aspects of themselves in it, filling it with energy. They also feed it with their blood, but they don't name it. It's a very big rule amongst Gloamists is you don't name your shadow. You don't give it form, you don't give it personality, you try to keep it simple. That way, even if it does turn into a blight, it turns into a simple-minded blight, like an animal. It's also less likely to rebel against you or have a will of its own. Even though they don't really think it has a full will, more of a rebellious streak based on the emotions you gave it, and you gave it too much autonomy on top of it. Remy, on the other hand, treated his like an imaginary friend, and it developed almost into a second personality. Sort of a subconscious in his head. It took on the things Remy wasn't able to do, his trauma. Because, well, Remy had a really, really shitty early life, like Charlie, and his trauma manifested into the shadow power. That's how shadows are achieved. Trauma combined with blood and feeding your negativity into the shadow. Basically, you need all three of these. Your shadow can quicken, which is a phase where it's starting to move, as a result of intense trauma. But when Charlie has this happen to her, yes, Charlie has that happen to her midway through the book, she barely really notices it. It's like her shadow is slightly out of sync. It's only her sister, Posse, who's literally been looking for this her whole life, who notices her sister's shadow is out of sync. And then when they go to a university student who's fascinated by seeing someone who has an actively quickening shadow, because Gloamists are pretty rare, and the ones who do start quickening generally don't come to a university to get studied, it's like, oh my god, can you tell me everything about it? It's like, well, how do I make it stop? It's like, well, you can't just stop feeding it blood. If you don't feed it blood, if you don't feed it power, if you don't use it, it'll fade. And if you don't do anything, it'll just return to normal. Which explains very much so how Gloamists have stayed so secret. Unless you know to feed it blood negativity, which is things that might happen if you're, in trauma because you've been beaten or whatever, you might drip blood into your shadow, and you might want to push away your negative thoughts, and the shadow will take it. So it's not just trauma, it's you got enough trauma to activate your shadow, then you gave your shadow blood, and you've been pushing your negativity into it, or other parts of you. You gave it a part of yourself, which are not things you would normally do all at once. Maybe the pushing away parts of yourself because you don't want that trauma, but the blood is a very specific activation trigger you have to do regularly. And even then, it's not a 100% straight deal. So, basically, it's a rare activation that can happen to basically anyone. Which explains why, Gloamists were so random. They would awaken their powers with no one around, and even if they awaken them, they might not always stick. So, explain the rarity. Now, as for Red, as Remy called him, or Vince, as we learn him, essentially, Remy treated him like a best friend, but when Mr. Salt found out, he made them murder people for him. Remy really hated this. He was a sweet kid, did not want to do any of this. He hated a lot of the pompish, billionaire bullshit that he had to put up with because he was grew up with basically nothing and had a lot of empathy for other people who didn't have, and felt almost disgusted with himself when he started noticing himself getting a little stuck up, recognizing offensive things what am I to judge them for this? As a result, Red was basically the one who ended up doing a lot of the killing. He didn't resent Remy for it. He cared a lot about Remy, obsessively so. Remy was the only person who treated him like a full being. Remy was always so thankful to Red and so grateful to everything he did. And he didn't just fill Red with negativity, he tried to fill him with other things too. He played with him, he talked with him, he lived with him. And as a result, Red developed almost like a secondary personality. Now, Salt got a little experimenty when he found out about this. And eventually Red tried to run away once he realized Salt had organized the death of his mother in a rehab facility once she started getting better, so he wouldn't have to go back to her. So Remy and Red decided to leave. Unfortunately, Salt didn't like that and killed him, along with another girl, and left their corpses so it looked like murder-suicide. Apparently that's Salt's default method. Long story. However, when he died, when he was stabbed in the heart, Remy did not want Red to die with him. So he basically poured everything he had left, all his blood, all his memories, everything he had, into Red. And Red essentially manifested into a fully formed Blight. Blights are usually just shadows that can move around freely. What Remy did was pour so much of himself that he gave Blight the ability to disguise himself as a human being. Which is something Blights have been intelligent Blights, what few might exist, have been looking to try and figure out how to do for literal centuries. And Remy did it by accident, obviously. Red, now Vince, who would take the name Vince, woke up, miles away, basically naked, with no memory of what happened, and only gained the memories back over time. He was essentially devastated. He had lost everything he cared about. He couldn't go to the aunt, almost sister Remy had known because, she was still in league with Salt and afraid of him and would go along with whatever he did. Salt wanted him captured for any number of reasons, like to kill, use him as a scapegoat to get onto the Cabal, and then used as a sacrificial lamb for his Hierophant pet. He had nowhere to go, basically no identity, although he did use Remy's resources to engineer false identification papers, but he wouldn't hold up to scrutiny. He had no credit. He had no place to go. All he had was a van. A van, some fake IDs, and a bit of money. And he didn't even know how to act human. He had no idea what to do. He wasn't ever human. He was the shadow. The mimic. And then he met Charlie. They had kind of a whirlwind night. He liked her. She liked him. They didn't ever bring each other's pasts up. He knew she must be hiding some stuff. She knew he must be hiding some things because, anybody with that bare minimum must be either running away from something or have a fake ID. But they didn't push each other. Eventually, after a few dates, they moved in with each other and, he paid half the rent. He cleaned hotels. Essentially, he was the hotel, blood cleaner. When there's a unfortunate incident involving a gun in a hotel, they need specialized cleaners to come in discreetly after the cops have cleared away the body to get rid of the bloodstains in a way that will not alarm their guests. And Remy was doing, and Vince, Red, now Vince, was doing that. Charlie, on the other hand, was a ex-thief, trying to stay away from it all, who hated Salt because he, long story short, her stepfather got her into cons by blackmailing her after she used a fake. Her mother was into supernatural stuff, so she used a fake possession by a old witch who got killed in order to frame her abusive stepfather, who constantly lied to her mother, for some other stuff. So her mother left him. The next stepfather heard the stories about it, realized that she was a little liar, didn't really realize the context, although once he did, he felt a little bad about blackmailing her. He still did it, but he felt bad about it. So I guess that makes him, a human being. Ugh. Not a good one, but a little more complicated. Anyway, he started using her for scams because she found out that he was actually a really good liar. He was a bit arrogant, never wanted her to be better than him, but he also found her sort of like an apprentice. He enjoyed teaching her the ropes of the, tricks of the trade. That's how she learned to be a thief, was from him. And on a job gone wrong, they tried to scam Salt out of some Gloamists books, which Charlotte was very iffy about because Gloamists had only just around that time become well known. And they were still very, very dangerous, and the only major incident about them was a freaking massacre by a shadow at that point, so, not exactly the kind of people you want to steal from, but the stepfather didn't listen. They were poisoned with their drinks, because they had figured them out early on, and then we're going to torture them and steal their shadows, but Charlie vomited it up. She had actually had to drink a lot of these beet juice in order to fake vomit up blood for the scam, and she used that to fake nearly dying. They left her there to determine what she would do if she was alive or not, and took the husband away, and took the stepfather away to go kill him. Charlie was actually found by Remy and Vince. Vince helped guide her. Vince, then Red at the time, helped guide her. She actually did this cool thing that was don't look behind you, which was a reference, for those of you who don't know, and for those of you who haven't read the book, because the book says this multiple times, it's a reference to Orpheus, leading his wife out of the underworld. Orpheus was told he could take his wife out of the underworld by Hades, but he had only one rule because Hades can't let the dead leave scot-free or whatever. And that was, you're not allowed to look behind you as you lead her out of the underworld. Orpheus looked behind her. Thank goodness, though, that Charlie did not. She was smart. She let the voice guide her out of the building, and she managed to get into the woods and be found by some, people. The husband was found with a girl's corpse in a car, burnt out. It would look like a murder-suicide, so everybody has, we're not going to talk about Charlie. She needs to work through this. If she needs to go to a therapist, let her. Because, obviously assume he's been taking this little girl off on secret getaways, and now she's found with a woman in his car. Obviously it must have been something sexual. We have to treat this very cautiously. So so she's really surprised when you find out. I was like, that's what you guys thought this was? He was taking me out to scam people, you idiots. Because she still hasn't told her mom. He was found dead with a girl. It looks bad when you say it out loud. Yeah. When you put it out loud, it's like, oh wait, that's what you guys were thinking, huh? I only saw it from my point of view, but yeah, when I look at it from your point of view, yeah, that did look pretty iffy, huh? He wasn't that bad a person. He was definitely a thief and a con artist who blackmailed a child into helping him with his scams, but that's just general dickishness. That's not utter monster. You never, attacked her in that regard. So, yay for being a mildly less shitty person that people believed you to be, guy. Okay. Charlie did kind of respect him, and as a result of, him nearly murdering her in their living room by poisoning them, Charlie has always held a deep-seated resentment of Salt, and then when he blackmails her to work for her, to find the Liber Noctum after she's been investigating it, there's a lot of other stuff going on. People are turning up dead with the Hierophant standing over them because it's ripping them apart, trying to get to the book, okay, quicker. The Hierophant is a punishment position by the Gloamist Council. They take a Gloamist who's made some horrible offense, like stealing shadows or murdering people. They attach this powerful blight they have captured to him and bind it to him, so they'll serve as a sort of enforcer, hunting down other blights before they can cause chaos or massacres. Long story short, Salt managed to get the Hierophant on his payroll essentially by promising him the Liber Noctum, which is said to have a ritual that can give a blight full physical human form, like Red, aka Vince. However, it turns out the Liber Noctum actually can't do that, and that Salt has been stringing him along for years with that promise, ever since the book was stolen by Vince. Remy, whatever. He said it was stolen by Remy when Remy was just trying to get away from him, because that way, the Hierophant would kill Remy, kill anyone associated with Remy who had blackmail material on him, and then he could say that the next person had it, and Charlie was unfortunately the next person. She and Adam, another con artist thief, got involved in it. Adam got massacred, and Salt told her she was to find him the book, or he'll stick the Hierophant on her and tell her he did it. She did it. And she realized this pretty quickly, that he basically gave her an impossible task, because it turns out Salt had the book locked up in his secret safe the whole time. That's the big twist at the end of the book, actually. It's really good. And from here on out, I will be warning you, this is massive spoilers. The rest have been other stuff. This is the overarching plot in Salt's theme. This is basically what happened. So, Salt used the book hidden in his laboratory as an excuse to kill Remy, get the Hierophant on his payroll, and buy his way into the Cabal, even breaking the rule of having a Gloamist of each type by replacing the recently deceased by his own, puppy dog hands, carapace position, which are basically Gloamists that wrap their shadow around themselves. He's a puppeteer who uses their Gloamist to influence the human bodies of others. And he's basically usurping the natural balance of Gloamist spheres of influence by taking position on the council when there's already a puppeteer up there. So his position is already really controversial. He has to assert that, but he's also playing all these power games. He's done a lot of illegal shit, even by Gloamist standards, who operate above the law a lot of the time. So, as a result of all of this, Charlie decides the plan to capture him. See, she actually does this really clever, too. She breaks into a safe and all that, finds Vince, aka Red, captured, because he was captured by Salt, and Salt plays this whole power game where she finally accuses him after getting the book. Now, what she did to finally catch him in his lies is really impressive, because he has a lot more reputation than her, and it's basically he said, even with what little proof she's been able to gather. However, she ends up trapping Salt in his own twisted lies. So, basically, they get to the vault room, they discuss what Vince is, the council's fascinated. They're actually not horrified, they're more fascinated, because it's I didn't think it was possible for him, the ramifications are absurd. He doesn't seem that violent. You're sure he's killed people? It's no, he hasn't. Yes, he has. It's well, we need to know which one it is, because he's a really useful resource we could use to deal with other blights who might be just like him. We do not know how many of them exist. They're apparently immortal due to the fact the blight we have attached to the Hierophant is 200 years old. How many more like him grew up with Gloamists giving them everything they had up to their dying breath and giving them new form? We need to know. So they basically have a moment where each of them are allowed to lay out their evidence. And Charlie doesn't have much. She has the people he's killed. She has the situational element, but it's mostly what she's seen. And Salt is able to quickly counter or give another version of everything she says. So finally, it comes down to the fact that they think that the book she has is a fake, or that she didn't steal it from Salt's vault. So she asks for a challenge. I'll break into Salt's vault and prove to you all that I can get in there. And she makes a big show of it, going through the mechanical lock and then going to the digital lock. But it doesn't open, because Salt has his phone with him and activate the alarm system that locks the vault up completely. Then, when he's asked to open the vault and show what's inside, he unlocks it. And so it works for him, even though he enters the same code. However, what's really smart about this is that Charlie planned for this. She realized that a digital system like this would have a phone alarm system that allowed the user to lock it. So, she planted something in the vault. One of the only pieces of physical evidence she got. A book written by that was held by one of the murder victims, and it's essentially a diary of the experiments that Vince had a diary of essentially all the horrible shit that Salt has done. It was either that or the I think it was the folder of evidence that, the other council member that Salt had killed by the Hierophant had. Essentially, they locked him into a lie. Salt says, she can't have possibly gone to my vault. We prove that. I'm telling the truth, you see? But then the council members are like, Salt, what the hell is this? She must have planted it. It's like, so what is it, Salt? Do I have the book? Did I prove that I broke into this place and that by factor you have lied at least once and that I am now the more trustworthy and my series of events are most likely? Or did I break into the vault? And that means I planted that. So you can declare that's false, at least, I guess. But we have to admit that I'm more right, and so that's probably true if I put it there. Even if you disregard that, you still have to believe me on all the other shit. Or you could say that I didn't plant it. And that, right there, is something you put into your own vault, which means it is damning evidence against you. And he's basically trapped between at least some of the things she says is true, and they're going to launch a full investigation, and definitely find out the truth, or he's a lying little son of a bitch, or he, is lying about all the other stuff right now, and they're gonna learn it all from that folder, which they've already started reading. She basically makes it in a position where they're either gonna find out the truth, or they already know the truth. And he breaks, and he's like, fine, I'll just freaking murder you. But it turns out Vince had his own plan. Because he hasn't just been sitting around for a while. He used one of the rooms that was really messy in one of the hotels he cleaned as a sort of home base to operate out of. It had like blood everywhere and they need to replace the carpet, but that wasn't going to happen for at least a few months. So he's been collecting false onyx tiles and he replaced the floor of the hidden chamber that had like onyx to prevent shadows from being used and replaced the handcuffs that the sister-like aunt that he had, the aunt who was basically a sister, put the false cuffs that Vince gave her on him so that he could burst out of them and put a knife to Salt's throat. Not like cut his throat right then and there, although basically everyone in the room wanted him to. Mostly because, I'm not a monster. I don't kill for fun. I only ever did it to protect Remy from you, asshole. Like, Red doesn't like killing. He hates all the horrible things he took on to protect Remy, but he did it to protect Remy. He didn't do it because he enjoyed doing it. Which is a big thing. They make it very clear that he doesn't enjoy killing. Now, he's not saying he doesn't enjoy killing people he really hates. Like, this one person tries to assault Charlie with Shadow and, suffocate her. I mentioned that. And he's like, no, if he was alive, I would have loved for him to come back to life so I could kill him again, because I would really enjoy making him suffer for hurting you. And it's just this interesting series of watching all the dominoes play off as everyone has their plans set and all of them march towards each other, resulting in this huge, crazy climax. One of the twists I really like is that, during the chaos, after the Hierophant goes ballistic when he finds out the ritual that Salt promised him doesn't exist and that Remy creating Vince was a complete accident, he goes ballistic and says, I'll take your flesh for my own, and starts going on a rampage. So Salt tries to escape and take out Charlie, but Charlie incapacitates him and uses an onyx knife she snuck in to cut off his shadow and leave him with it. Now, we hear later that he was stabbed multiple times in the chest, and left for dead. However, we never saw the shadow manifest, and it was mentioned that the daughter, or the person who was basically a sister to Remy, was seen walking in later with a bit of blood on her hands. And it's basically all but stated that she stabbed him like 12 times in the chest, brutally murdering her all on her own. Which, honestly, makes a lot of sense. She lived with her a lot longer than Remy, and it's implied that she's had to do some stuff she's not proud of too. And throughout the whole book, a big point's made of, like, every time we get from Remy and Red's perspectives, or when we hear about her, we're always like, she's the person who's learned that trying to resist against Salt is pointless because he always wins. She learned that a long time before I came here, and she just wants me to stop resisting and give in because it's not worth it. And honestly, the idea of her just being like, you have no power anymore. You have nothing. The Cabal won't protect you. No one will protect you. It's in the middle of a chaos area. Your shadow's been cut off, so no one will blame me if you wind up with a knife in your chest. They'll just think there's another blight around here, so I'm going to frickin' take it and stab you and stab you and stab you. And it's like, yeah, he deserved that. And in the end, Vince is, brought before the Cabal. They decide to spare his life after he helps defeat the Hierophant. But they want to turn him into the new Hierophant, with his sister and/or aunt. Remy's sister and/or aunt, who's really smug about it to Charlie, even though she's basically going to be, the meat suit for a murder machine that they're going to send against monstrous shadows, who will very most likely kill him, or kill her, or potentially cripple her, and it's basically going to be his service for 2 years before he's allowed to walk semi-free after, being watched constantly. In addition, they have no idea how stitching him onto a new person might affect his memories or personality, because there's literally never been anything like him, and shadows are very weird when it comes to that stuff to even begin with. However, Charlie, she can't handle it. She's done a lot. In order to not be possessed by Salt and be puppeteered, she had to give up her shadow, so she gave it to Posse, who always wanted this. And she willingly gave up her budding magical abilities to the little sister who always wanted him, and essentially her giving her life. Gloamists are very needed. They're a commodity. Most Gloamists seem to be doing at least partially well, and they always seem to have decent work around them. Like, if you're a Gloamist, you have opportunities, She's always wanted to be one. She wants to study shadow magic. She wants to learn about it. And she clearly has a bond with Charlie's shadow. Like, from the few scenes we see where she's like, the shadow seems much more active with Posse. She knows how to care for it. She knows how to, give it what it needs. She loves it. And the shadow seems to feed off that, almost like the happiness instead of the misery Charlie feels, where it feels very sullen and sluggish, only acting when it really needs to. It's constantly dancing around Posse because she always wants this. She's filling it with happiness rather than misery, which Charlie looks at something good. And in a way, she's given herself a way to watch over her sister. So it's a win for her sister, but it does leave Charlie feeling very empty. So she makes the choice that I saw coming right after the aunt/sister started bragging about how she was going to be Red's caretaker, or as we let you know, in Vince. So Charlie was like, "Okay, you guys owe me," and they were like, "Yes, we do owe you, and we want to deal with that right now because we're one of the most powerful organizations in all of Shadow Magic, and we do not like owing some random thief who we suspect has stolen from all of us multiple times." She was like, "Oh, do you want to know what all the time I've stolen from you? I've stolen from you and all your friends. Here, let me list them out to you." Like, what are you doing? We owe you. We don't want to murder you. Will you just shut up, girl? It's like, well, you said the Hierophant position's a punishment, so punish me. And they basically just look at her like, are you insane? You do realize the last Hierophant was handless and had to have the shadow replace his hand with shadow hands because a blight bit them off. This is not a safe and or nice position. There is no telling how Vince will react when he is stitched onto you. He could lose everything, revert to some kind of animalistic state. We have no clue. She's like, that's my decision. Make me the Hierophant. So that's how the book ends. She's walking away from the place with Vince, or actually now Red. Because it turns out, we don't know if it's temporary, but when she took Red on, he asks, "Where's Remy?" He doesn't remember anything of the last few months of All those nights they spent together, staring up at the stars, the conversations, those slight moments of silence and comfort. He doesn't remember any of it. And she doesn't know if it's like his first, manifestation when he became semi-human, where he forgot everything for a few weeks, or if he's going to just lose it forever. She doesn't know if Vince, as she knew him, is gone. But she's determined to protect what's left of Remy, Red, and Vince, so she says, don't worry, I'll take care of you. We'll take it one day at a time and see where things go. And she genuinely seems to want to just take care of him, even though it's breaking her on the inside to see a person she knows and has a pre-existing relationship treat her like a complete stranger and only really care about her blood. Because, he still, Red's defining character trait was he really only cared about Remy. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting seeing how they develop. And I would really like a sequel to Book of Night, because I feel like this is a world with a lot more to explore. I mean, Charlie's a freaking Hierophant. We know that there are other blights out there. We know that there's tons of information we don't understand about them. Hell, the fact that Vince was even able to exist and no Gloamist had ever even seen something like this before. Maybe they had. We don't know. Gloamists were so secretive, so individual, that their techniques could just disappear, either through accident or through just nobody writing it down. So they don't know how many other blights out there might be like Vince. Maybe we'll run into a group of them who are upset that he blew the lid on their existence. Maybe we'll run into some more vicious blight. I would have loved to see Charlie Hall, Thief, and Hierophant, Thief for hire and Hierophant on the side. That sounds like a fun and interesting thing. You can have, her trying to rebuild her relationship with Red, who eventually might regain his memories of Vince, or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll only have dull recollections and he'll have to rebuild an entirely new relationship from scratch, which can also be very enjoyable. All right. Well, that's it. I'm going to be reviewing everything everywhere all the time, and I'm very excited about it. See you next time. Bye. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and thank you for listening to The Dragon's Library. Please subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes. The Dragon's Library releases new episodes Tuesday and Friday each week, and you can follow us on Twitter at dragon_library2. If you want to suggest an episode topic, my email is in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for all your support.